Hi there. There's not much we can all agree on in this country right now, but one thing I think we can all agree on is that something has to change. And I would like to propose that the first thing that's got to change is the voting system that got us here. So here are 5 reasons why first past the post has to go. Number 1. It creates safe seats, and safe seats create bad MPs. Now, I don't know about you, but one of the things that I find genuinely alarming about the ongoing Brexit clusterfuck is the number of, well, one hesitates to say stupid in such an enlightened age, so shall we say intellectually limited and incurious people there are currently serving as members of parliament in this country. And not just as members of parliament. We don't just have backbench MPs who are under the impression that Ireland and Britain are the same country. We have Northern Ireland secretaries who didn't know that people tend to vote along sectarian lines in Northern Ireland. We have a Brexit secretary who doesn't know that the port in Dover is a thing. And you have to wonder, how has this come about? How do we end up with people of such restricted capacity in such positions of high office? And I think a big problem is safe seats. The fact that most of the country consists of safe seats, seats that always go to one or the other of the big 2 parties as a matter of local tradition, has long been a blight upon our political system. First of all, it means that elections are decided in a handful of key marginals, so they're the ones that get all the attention. But while most of the country consists of constituencies where you could basically get a talking wheelie bin elected if you slap the right colour rosette on it, we are going to end up with talking wheelie bins in Parliament. Which brings us to number 2. It perpetuates a false dichotomy, and this creates disenfranchisement. Now, one of the reasons that we're stuck with first past the post is that it massively benefits the 2 major parties. And because one or the other of the 2 major parties is in power at any given time, the one that's in power, i.e. the one that just won by first past the post, is generally rather loath to do anything about it. But it perpetuates the idea that those are the only 2 parties worth voting for. That basically, if you're a progressive person, you've got Labour. That's it. They're your party. You have to vote for them. It doesn't matter if you fundamentally disagree with their core policy stance, or if you think they're all a bunch of loonies, or you're kind of suspicious of their attitude to Jews. They're your party. You have to vote for them. Similarly, if you're a conservative-leaning person, then you got the Tories. They're your party. You got to vote for them. No choice. Vote for the Tories. It doesn't matter even if you are broadly in favour of their policies on limited government and taxation, you think they're all a bit nuts and kind of racist and driving the country over a cliff edge right now. No, they are your party. You must vote for them. No choice. And this leads to disenfranchisement. You end up with a great percentage of the population that does not feel represented by either of the parties that ever finds themselves in power. And we know that if they thought there was a viable alternative, they would go for that viable alternative, because it just happened in Scotland. In Scotland, there now is a political party, which is neither the Conservatives nor Labour, which a lot of the population do feel represents them, and as such, they're kind of wiping the floor with the Conservatives and Labour right now. Now, if we could break this false duopoly and give the smaller parties a fighting chance, then more people would feel that there was somebody worth voting for. Because disenfranchisement is a dangerous thing in both directions. It's not just that people who feel disenfranchised can sometimes seek solutions out with the political framework, but it's also when a government feels that the people feel disenfranchised, it no longer feels any kind of obligation towards them. Now, I lived in Scotland from the late 80s to the mid 90s, so the arse end of the Thatcher era and the Major years, during which time the Tories, through dint of being in power in Westminster, exercised absolute power over Scotland, despite being at various times either the 4th or 5th most popular party in Scotland. So the Scots could do nothing to get rid of the Tories, and the Tories knew it. So the Tories kind of used the Scots as lab rats. Anytime they had a ropey bit of legislation they weren't sure if it was going to roll or not, they'd try it out in Scotland first, because what were the Scots going to do? Everybody's forgotten that the poll tax kicked in Scotland a year earlier than it kicked in south of the border. Number 3, the idea that it creates strong governments is a myth. Now, proponents of first past the post and opponents of alternative voting, single transferable vote, proportional representation, the various names it goes by, for most of my lifetime have compared our kind of governments favourably with the chaotic governments that one finds on the continent. Generally the Italians. Now look at the Italians. They can never hold a government together for more than a few months. 30 or 40 tiny political parties all doing deals and falling out with each other and forming coalitions and breaking coalitions, having to have a new election every 2 years. Is that the kind of government you want? Is it? I would point out that for all but 2 of the last 9 years, we've had a hung parliament in this country, and we just had 3 general elections in the space of 7 years. Which leads me to point number 4. The idea that strong governments are a good thing is also a myth. Yeah, what is so great about having completely unified, i.e. totally unchecked government? For all that we rather sneered at the idea while it was happening, it is now apparent that being in coalition with the Liberal Democrats between 2010 and 2015 was moderating the Conservative Party to a very substantial extent, as evinced only by the fact that once they had the whole show to themselves, it took them just over a year to drive the country off a cliff. And the thing is, when you have two parties that just kind of lay claim to one side each of the political process, they get comfy and they get complacent and then they fragment. So what we've ended up with is essentially a dozen political parties masquerading as two or three. The Conservative Party is now in three distinct factions. You've got the hard Brexiters, the soft Brexiters and the Remainers. And the Labour Party now consists of at least two factions. You've got the Corbynites, well, you've got Corbyn, and then everybody else. Now, if we knew that this is a coalition, if they were actually different parties, then they could shuffle around, they could link up, they could form alliances. The Tory Remainers could actually get together with the Labour Remainers, rather than just half a dozen of them breaking off and forming the new political party, which is what they've actually had to do. But instead of which, the two parties have to pretend that they are single entities when they're patently not. The whole thing's just kind of dishonest. Which leads us to number 5. It doesn't work. I mean, wherever you are on the political spectrum, whatever your stance is on Brexit, surely nobody with a single functioning brain cell and an ounce of honesty can look at where we are now and go, yeah, this seems okay. However you think we got here, the fact that we are here means that the system that brought us here isn't working and needs to change. So, there you go. Those are my reasons why First Past the Post is completely past its sell-by date. What do we replace it with? Well, like I say, there are 3 or 4 different versions of proportional representation. They're all more or less the same thing. That's something to look at in due course. And let's face it, if Brexit finally resolves itself one way or another, a lot of us are going to need a new drum to bang. All right, see you soon.
This video was made possible by the supporters of my Patreon project, who help me make fun things while receiving great perks and rewards. If you enjoyed it, why not follow the link and join us?